In the summer of 1590, English explorer John White returned to the coast of what is now North Carolina to find 117 people, men, women, and children, completely gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no blood, just a single word carved into a wooden post. Croatoan. The Roanoke colony had vanished without a trace, and despite more than 400 years of archaeology, investigation, and theory, we still do not fully know what happened to them. This is one of the oldest and most enduring mysteries in American history, and the closer you look at it, the stranger it gets. To understand what happened, you need to understand how extraordinary it was for these people to be there at all. The year was 1587. England had been trying and failing to establish a permanent foothold in the New World for over a decade. Previous expeditions had ended in disaster. Supply ships that never arrived. Soldiers who starved. Colonists who turned back. Queen Elizabeth needed a success. The pressure on the expedition's organizer, Sir Walter Raleigh, was immense. The 117 settlers who landed on Roanoke Island in July 1587 were not soldiers or explorers. They were ordinary people. Farmers, craftsmen, a surgeon, a minister. 17 of them were women. 9 were children. They had been promised fertile land, a fresh start, and the protection of the crown. They crossed the Atlantic in wooden ships, spent weeks at sea, and arrived on a thin strip of Barrier Island off the coast of what is now North Carolina, with nothing but what they had carried. On August 18, 1587, just weeks after landing, a woman named Eleanor Dare gave birth to a baby girl. They named her Virginia Dare. She was the first English child born in the Americas. Her grandfather was John White, the colony's governor. 9 days after Virginia was born, White sailed back to England for supplies. He left behind his daughter, his newborn granddaughter, and 114 other souls. He promised to return within months. He would not return for 3 years. The reason was catastrophic timing. White arrived back in England in the autumn of 1587 to find the entire English naval fleet commandeered by the Crown. Spain had launched its famous Armada, the most powerful fleet in the world, and England needed every available ship for its defense. White begged for permission to return. He was refused, again and again. He watched months turn into years, helpless, while his family waited on an island he could not reach. He finally secured a ship in 1590, after weeks at sea, battered by storms. He arrived at Roanoke on August 18th, his granddaughter Virginia's 3rd birthday. The settlement was silent. The houses had been dismantled, not destroyed, not burned. Taken apart, beam by beam, with apparent care. The heavy cannon had been buried. The supplies were gone. But scattered among the remains were personal items, things no one leaves behind unless they have to. Books, equipment, maps, and carved into a wooden post at the entrance of the palisade, a single word: Croatoan. White searched desperately. He found no bodies, no graves, no signs of violence. Before he had left, he and the colonists had agreed on a signal. If they moved voluntarily, they would carve their destination. If they were in danger, they would add a cross above the word. There was no cross, which meant, White believed, they had gone to Croatoan Island, a place about 50 miles to the south, home to a friendly tribe he knew. But a storm blew his ships off course before he could investigate. He was forced to sail for the Azores to wait out the season. He never made it back to Croatoan. He never found his daughter. He never found Virginia. He died in Ireland a few years later, his family's fate unknown to him until the end. For the next 4 centuries, historians, archaeologists, and amateur investigators tried to answer the question he never could. Where did 117 people go? The oldest theory, and still the most widely accepted, is that the colonists assimilated with the local indigenous population. The Croatoan people, who lived on Hatteras Island to the south, were known to be friendly. Trade relationships had already been established. It was not unthinkable that, facing starvation and with no supply ships coming, the settlers would have negotiated shelter with the tribe. Later, English explorers reported something strange. Members of certain native communities in the region had gray eyes. Some spoke a few words of English. Some described having ancestors who, in their words, talked from a book, a description, historians believe, of reading. These encounters were documented by explorers in the early 1600s, just years after the colony disappeared. Then in 2020, an archaeological team excavating on Hatteras Island, the original Croatoan territory, found something significant. Buried beneath centuries of soil, English copper alloy, European trade beads, a rapier hilt, and fragments of armor consistent with late 16th century English manufacture. These were not trade goods that had drifted south. These were personal possessions, things someone had carried and kept. The evidence pointed strongly toward the assimilation theory. The settlers, or at least some of them, had gone south and been absorbed into Croatoan society. But a second set of findings complicated the picture. A site called Site X, located 50 miles inland near Mary Hill, North Carolina, also yielded English artifacts from the same period, which suggests the colony may have split, some going south to Croatoan, others heading inland. 2 groups, possibly with 2 different fates. Among the Lumbee people of North Carolina, who have lived in the interior of the state for centuries, oral tradition speaks of pale-skinned strangers who arrived among them and never left. The Lumbee have long claimed partial English descent. Some historians take that claim seriously. Others remain skeptical. And then there is the darkest theory of all, that some or all of the colonists were killed, not by the Spanish, not by starvation, but by a neighboring tribe with whom relations had soured in the years since White left. A later English expedition was told by a native chief that men dressed like the English had been put to the sword. Whether this referred to the Roanoke colonists has never been confirmed. The truth, most historians now believe, is probably plural. The colony fractured. Some were absorbed. Some died. Some may have survived for decades, living entirely different lives than the ones they had imagined when they boarded that ship in 1587. What stays with me is not the mystery itself. It's the human cost of it. John White, standing on a silent beach, reading his granddaughter's name carved into a post that meant nothing. Eleanor Dare, who crossed an ocean with a newborn baby, trusting that her father would come back. Virginia Dare herself, the first English child born in America, who lived her entire life without the world ever knowing what became of her. She would be 439 years old this August. We still don't know where she's buried. We may never know. That carved word, Croatoan, is everything they left behind. If you have a theory about what happened to the Roanoke colony, leave it in the comments. And next week we go somewhere far darker. A secret government program that experimented on its own citizens for 25 years, and then tried to burn every piece of evidence. Subscribe so you don't miss it.